Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our next panel, EV Fires, Changing Perspective Collaboratively.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. We wanted to take an opportunity here to talk about electric vehicles and the potential for fire. And one of the things that we've been looking at is across the board is that if you look at the history of the automobile industry, there has been car fires. And we know that as we look at the data across the United States, just car fires that occur on a daily basis, what we're starting to notice is that putting out or extinguishing an EV fire is a little bit different. So what we really want to do is we want to take the time. We're looking to really jumpstart here today a collaborative effort. So if there's anyone in the crowd today that afterwards, if you want to get involved, we'll have a QR code. We are looking to put together a group to be proactive, collaboratively working together. So my first person to go here is Victoria Hutchison from the National Fire Protection Association. And why don't you introduce yourself and share what you think of what's going on in the space with EVs.
All right, thanks everyone for joining us. As Kevin said, I'm Victoria Hutchison. I work for the Fire Protection Research Foundation, which is the independent research affiliate of the National Fire Protection Association, NFPA, if any of you are familiar with them. So there I lead most of the battery research on stationary applications and all types of mobility, so EVs, electric buses, electric scooters, all of that. So there's a lot that we're learning, right? This is a new space. As Kevin started off saying, fires in vehicles are not uncommon. I think NFPA releases statistics every year. We're somewhere around 200,000, a little over, vehicle fires every year annually in the United States. This is kind of bread and butter to the fire service, since vehicles first hit the market, right? They know very well how to handle a vehicle fire. Now we're introducing new fuel sources, particularly with batteries, as we're seeing with EVs. It's, they're comfortable, they know how to handle an EV fire or a vehicle fire, but they need to know what's different about this compared to an internal combustion engine vehicle. And so there's a lot of data that they just need to know how do they need to approach this differently. The key point there is really we want to get our responders home safe, right? They're there to protect us. They're there, if there is a vehicle fire, they're there to respond to that. So what information do they need to know? So there's often, a lot of concern. There are challenges with EVs, with lithium-ion batteries from a fire perspective, but we're getting a really good understanding of what that looks like. And trying to understand the hazard in comparison. So we are seeing, when comparing EVs to ICEs, how you characterize or compare the fires, they are pretty comparable. When you look at the exterior body of a car, when it's sitting, an ICE is beside an EV, it looks the same, right? The body is pretty similar. It's made predominantly of plastics, which really drives that fire and that behavior. But there's unique characteristics to lithium-ion batteries that pose challenges to the fire service. So we are doing a lot of research to give guidance of what's the best way to approach those. There is some of those risks of stranded energy. There's a potential for reignition, which is new. So what do we need to understand about that? When you go to fight an EV fire, what are the different tactics that you can take? What are the impacts of those on the stranded energy risk down the road? And what has an impact, what impacts the duration of the event. So there's a lot of considerations, a lot of testing that we have going on that's going to be feeding into training programs so that we can educate the fire service in kind of a gamification method to where we can show different scenarios and the behaviors of those, and then what are the different strategies that you can take and what is the impact of that. So more of that interaction of taking the learnings from the research and getting that out to the fire service to really just improve their education and understanding and kind of their toolbox of what they can do when they come up to these fires. Thank you.
Thanks, Victoria. Next, Chief Mike O'Brien, right here from Brighton, Michigan. But you're doing a lot of stuff at the national level with the IChiefs, International Association of Fire Chiefs. So you share a little bit of what you've been involved in, and there again, we're working it back to the street level. But we definitely have some work to do on the awareness side of it.
Yeah, thanks, Fire Marshal. Michael O'Brien, I'm the fire chief in Brighton, Michigan, and really from the international level, one of the things that we have truly been working on is how do we prepare our fire service, which is this big thing, to not only be able to operate around EVs, both in an extrication or a rescue scenario, all the way to the vehicle fires. And right, there's a lot of change that's happening once that battery pack is involved in the accident. And our manufacturers are really doing tremendous things to make beautiful, safe products. But accidents happen sometimes, and that's where our firefighters really come in. And so we've been spending a lot of time not only learning from both maybe manufacturers, the work that NFPA and other partners are doing, but really trying to educate that fire service component to make sure they're ready on game day. You know, if you really think about it, most of our firefighters, the first EV fire they're going to go to will be on a roadway. It'll be in a house, it will be somewhere. They won't have a chance to have really practiced that. And so we want to make sure that we give them as much equipment to successfully cool and extinguish and solve that incident. But it's a lot of changing paradigms. It's a lot of changing viewpoints. I think we know how to handle gasoline for the most part. And so what is the hazards? What hazards might present to an off-gassing battery pack all the way to a flaming battery pack? And how do we keep them safe in all of those arenas they're going to see? You know, if you think about one of the tough ones, we got a lot of water here in Michigan. And sometimes vehicles leave the roadway, end up in water. So how do you properly make sure response guides, training match that submerged vehicle that maybe is electrified and keep everybody involved safe? And so from the international perspective, this isn't just a North America thing. We're working with partners across the globe and trying to best understand. But we're also being approached with a lot of people trying to solve the situation for us who are maybe looking to make $1 or $2. And in certain things that maybe manufacturers don't recommend to just, hey, best practices. And this may be a additive to our water. It could be a mechanism that does something to the battery pack. It could be a tarp. And so really a lot of the work that we're working to do is just bring the resources that we know. And I'm a true believer that what we know today is one thing. And in the collaboration we're probably going to continue to see over the next year or two is going to hopefully improve our techniques. Because arguably the time frame, last week I took 2 calls from fire chiefs across the U.S. that had vehicle fires, 4+ hour incidents. And our fire service across the U.S. is extremely taxed. And to tie up multiple companies for multiple hours on a vehicle fire is a game changer. And so understanding that, the impacts on our environment, the built environment, are really something that we're trying to spend a lot of energy on. And I would just pause and say, you know, you look at our manufacturers and the work they're doing, it's not just the EVs. It's moving the battery packs from maybe LG Chem or the cells from LG Chem, taking them to a location where they're making them into packs, taking them to packs to assembly. Our firefighters are going to be interacting with raw material to cells to packs all the way through, and we just need to make sure that we're doing the best to keep them ramped up. And if you ever just need to pause, think about that company officer at 2 o'clock in the morning pulling up on a vehicle extrication. Have we done our job to get them properly equipped? Because truly lives could be on the line. And so really it's been about partnerships and keeping the dialogue moving forward.
Great. Thanks, Chief. Todd, welcome. And Todd Brigmon from General Motors. I found out today you have some fire background, which is that even makes it even better today, right? But what are some things that General Motors is doing? I was at the Proving Grounds probably 3-4 months ago. Very impressed with the program as General Motors continue to educate firefighters. I know Victoria and I talk about how do we get that information out to all 1.3 million firefighters across the United States, and it's bigger than that too, right? So welcome today, and why don't you fill everybody in on what GM's doing.
Thanks, Kevin. So Todd Brigmon, I am the EVOS team leader for General Motors. What EVOS stands for is Electric Vehicle Occupational Safety. So my job is to look at the impacts on the building of electric vehicles from the very formation of cells all the way through until you recycle them. What impact that has on not only the employees of GM, but also the consumers of our products. So GM takes safety very seriously, and they want to create and have the safest production operations and sellable vehicles to the customer. Part of that, in looking at that process, was how do we train our first responders on proper response and remediation of a vehicle fire. Accidents are going to happen, they happen every day. So one of the things that we started looking at is how can we take our technical expertise and apply it to a program that would allow firefighters to understand and ask questions of the expert that are designing and building these vehicles. So what GM came up with is a GM EV first responder training, and it's a website right now. It doesn't have all of the information up there yet, but it is coming. And we took that principle with the Illinois State Fire Marshals, and we went all over the country and got as many municipalities as we could to come and train them on how to extricate in an accident or in a water event, how to extinguish the fire, how to safely disable the high voltage circuit within the battery. I think it's going to be an evolving process. I think there's still more to learn, there's still more to teach, and to the chief's point, there's another million or so folks that need to be trained. So we're developing an online academy. It'll be available to everyone. You all can go and look at it right now and see everything that we offer with OnStar. We go as far as to even talk about Recycle My Battery, which is a site that allows you to find resources on how to recycle an electric vehicle battery. So I think we're covering all those aspects, and we're trying to learn more and spread the word and try to educate the folks in the first responder perspective. So not only the fire departments, the EMS folks, and anyone else that may have to interact with vehicles. You consider, where does your vehicle go when you get in an accident? It goes to a wrecking yard. Do they understand what potential hazards they're getting involved with the moving and storage of those vehicles? And again, we want to make sure that everyone is protected and they have a good working knowledge and understand what hazards are presented so that they can properly protect themselves if they do have to act. Same thing applies to the fire department too.
And I think that's a great point that you bring up. You talk about, right from the beginning, the raw materials to build it all the way to the recycling. And we know that there's going to be a time when the cars are going to need new batteries. And that's one of the things that the fire service is talking about is what happens when I have 3 or 4 batteries waiting to be recycled that are potentially out behind the dealership and stuff. So we'll get there. But that's really what we're here to today is we're here to look at moving forward. So thanks for that.
Yes,
Todd.
thank you.
Our next guest is Ron Butler. We're home in Detroit, member of the Detroit Fire Department for 25 years.
25 years.
25
I'm the resident
years.
old guy here.
There you go. But after DFD, you got involved in batteries. And I know I met you at an NFPA conference back in 2019 and at the airport coming back from
Absolutely.
San Antonio. So what have you been doing? I know you've been doing some work with the DOT. And we've got to move these raw materials around too, right?
Yeah.
So
There's obviously a very clear progression of ideas as we move this way, and it makes sense. Even to people who are lay, it begins to make sense. We're focused and we're funded by United States Department of Transportation, PHMSA, to look into better ways to transport, store, and charge the commodity. So from a first responder's perspective, the only issue doesn't necessarily remain with the electric vehicle as a commodity. It is also about the battery itself. So as the battery is moved to and from, there can be accidents, there can be collisions. For some odd reason, I get phone calls from Chemtrek every Friday night on like clockwork. As I'm sitting in my easy chair, we have a rollover accident in Texas with, I won't name a company, but it starts with a T, full of batteries. What do we do? Well, strangely enough, we expect that the fire departments know exactly what to do from the time they're dispatched. That is far from the case. We have to walk them through how to process that scene and manage the scene from a safety perspective. So my company, through our funding from PHMSA and Department of Defense as well, we design systems that allow for the safe transport and smart storage of batteries, battery modules, battery packs, et cetera.
Okay. And that's a good point, I think, for some of the folks who are in the crowd today. Chemtrek is a number that first responders, when they get on the scene, especially involving chemicals, transportation, it's a 1-800 number you can call and get specialists or folks who know about that. And I agree with you 100%. And when I say that, I was just recently at the National State Fire Marshals Association meeting, and they're saying, hey, Kevin, Michigan's doing a lot with batteries. We're seeing more, just more cars on the road. how do we catch up on the firefighter training? So I appreciate you being here today, and that probably is one of the things that we look at is that's what we look to the next steps is the collaboration of how do we bring the operational side of the fire service to the manufacturing and right on through. So thank you for being here today. And
Absolutely.
it's good. Lisa, you're the last in the first round here. Lisa Lark.
Absolutely.
And why don't you tell us a little bit about what your dad's been doing and how you got involved and a program that you have through Ford Motor Company actually to train firefighters on vehicle extrication, but we're also seeing that this is also allowing them to get access to the vehicles to learn more. So please share.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it. Really glad to be here today. So I think the common thread that we've heard throughout all of the panelists has been collaboration and training. In order to get the information and the skills from the OEMs, from the manufacturers, from places like Chemtrek, into the hands of the first responders, the men and the women who are approaching these incidents middle of the night, first thing in the morning. We want to create something that gets the information from point A to point B. And so for the last 30 years, Lark Logistics has been managing a vehicle loan program through Ford Motor Company, and loan is the key word there. Fire departments like Brighton Area Fire have access to a scrapped destined vehicle, a vehicle that Ford Motor Company was going to scrap regardless. They have access to that vehicle for a period of days, up to a couple of weeks even. They can practice extrication skills. They can become familiar with the materials such as the new aluminum body panels, how do airbags work, laminated glass, all of these new technologies. And so for the last 3-4 years, we've really been focused on getting the EVs into the hands of those first responders so that they are able to have a first-person, hands-on familiarity with them, interact with the vehicle, because it's one thing to read shutdown procedures in a PDF format. It's very helpful. It's super informative. It's another thing to watch a video about it, but to be able to look at the vehicle in person so that it's not the first time that you see it in the field makes a tremendous difference. And we're really just focused on ways to bring all of these parties together and get more hands-on collaboration and information sharing.
Yeah, and we really appreciate that. You made these vehicles available for extrication, and you trained a lot of firefighters, especially here in Michigan. And I agree that there's got to be a platform somewhere out there, and it's probably virtual. I mean, if we're going to reach 1.3 million firefighters across the country, we're going to have to look at that. So let's kind of switch gears for it. I'm looking for just a kind of a short response from each of you. Let's talk about collaboration that maybe you see to address fires in vehicles, whether it's a car fire or because of a car accident and a battery maybe goes into thermal runaway, but also into, everyone is potentially having a battery at home they're charging. And I know everybody charged something in the last 24 hours, I guarantee it, right? But we're talking about vehicles, we're talking about, charging at homes, and some of the challenges that's going to present to our first responders. But even further, even at the charging stations that, where those are put and, what are the capabilities of making sure the firefighters are ready for that. So, Veronica, you want to go first? Or?
Sure. So I'll start probably with training, at least from the NFPA perspective. So take this from two lanes here. We do have, we do a lot with training on batteries. Then we also have the public education where we're really trying to promote just understanding of you have these in your homes, you have them, they're surrounding you, and what information does the public need. But starting with training, it's so important to have a cross-section of input into that training. So NFPA has been developing training around EVs for years. I think, Ron, you were one of the original ones that helped us with that years ago. But getting that input from the fire service, getting input from manufacturers, people that know the technology very well, people that know the operations side very well, and giving you input along the way. Also, for NFPA's training, our research does feed into that. So there's the core element of collaboration built into all of our work is making sure you have all of that broad range of expertise guiding that research along the way, given the on-the-ground input that you don't always get in the lab, right, to make sure that it translates to practice. So that's critical. Then on the public education side, it's making sure doing alternative ways, leveraging some of the tools that we have to get the information into people's homes, just recognizing where people are getting information, how they're consuming it, and adapting that content, because people don't realize the common assumption is that if it's in my home, it's safe. And while it may be, there's still a chance that something can happen, and they need to know what to do if it does. So just making sure that you translate that, easy digestible information, but go to the people with that.
So, it's interesting, and they always say you learn something every day, right? Do you think that downstream, that as we move into Fire Prevention Week in the United States, and we do it the second week of October, that will the topic be batteries?
That's actually come up. So I would expect it to be. I know the safety stand down, the theme of that this year was lithium-ion batteries. So it's touching a lot of people. You see what's happening in New York and London, all over the world. It's starting to catch people's attention when it affects you in your home. So I think that could be a theme in the near future. It's definitely come up. It's made the short list.
Yeah, without a doubt. And that's one of the things we look at: community risk reduction. We want to make sure everybody has working carbon monoxide detectors. We want to make sure that everybody has working smoke alarms. But we also want folks to understand, could be something just as simple as unplug what's charging, move it away, isolate it, right? Move it out, get it out of your home, and then of course calling the fire department right away. We look at it as we move forward. So how about this, Ron? I know you wanted to jump in.
I think all this
collaboration.
I think all this begs the question: who is the first responder? So we assume that the fire department or police department or what have you is going to be considered the first responder. I'm a little bit biased. I think they're the most important responder, but they're not necessarily the first. So the first responder may not be the fire service or anyone else on that side. From an organizational perspective, I've been to 70 or 80 different companies that are looking to get better at battery ownership. I've been to some organizations that prepare themselves. This man's organization stands out as one that was well prepared. We did not find a lot. But we go to other organizations where they're not ready for battery ownership. What have you done? What do your SOPs look like, standard operating procedures? What do your emergency response procedures look like? Have you trained your employees? What is the dictate for responding to a battery fire on someone's floor? Do you try to address it physically with some type of formal response, or is your job to get out of the building? For those people that are here that are invested in some organization from some perspective with a battery, make sure that you have that covered. It's your responsibility, it's your right to know what the SOPs look like, to know what our ERPs look like. And if they're not right, if they're really bad, push to change them.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, we want you to be in business, and we don't want you to have a fire in your workspace, your manufacturing space. And that brings another, see, we keep bringing up more components, right? Talk about how do we educate the public to what are they going to do with their batteries, to the manufacturing side of it. So this is good. This is, I think we sat down and we said, well, we're going to talk about electric vehicles, I should say. And usually it involves emergency vehicles, but you're right. It does start at the workforce, and it does start of having standard operating procedures. And Mike, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, if we stay at home for a second, one of the things that we're seeing at home is people like to tinker. And I think about some of our automotive. It's not uncommon that people in the past have done a lot of work on their motors and their vehicles. And I know we have this right to repair, but one of the things that, at least from us, whether it's in the small mobility space to EVs, problems start when they start tinkering with this very high-end technology in the battery packs. So the fire service is really trying to spend a lot of time. You think about that battery management that has to start happening in our homes, all the way down to our kids, right? When your electric scooter is not working appropriately, the answer isn't charge it while we go out to dinner, right? There has to be some more conversations. And so, Victoria hit on, right, the right charger for the right piece of equipment and in that home. So there's no doubt we're changing this space, but the fire service is definitely, when you look at across the state of Michigan and the United States, there's a major change in our built environment. We are going to become the battery capital probably of the world around here, which puts a lot of batteries into buildings. So, from a fire service perspective, we're working a lot with a lot of teams to keep those buildings safe through fire building code development, in really trying to get what's best. Because everybody is looking, I think, Ron, you said it, but everybody's looking for the best processes, the practices. Because if there's one thing I think we all can agree on, when a cell's having a bad day, it's typically a very fast event. And it can cascade if we don't have the right measures in place. And so it's how do we get that recognition through building detection, thermal, personal response, and training. And we've got to carry that forward. And likewise, as the consumer market does this complete 180, this complete changeover, we're going to be training a lot of people in, hey, this is what you should be doing when your car runs funny, or how to keep it safe. But I know Todd's going to answer one of the questions that's really important about EVs and homes. I know he is.
So EVs and homes. So one of the things that I talk about sometimes is, and you can draw some analogy to some of the things that people have seen that's gone on in New York with the mobility devices that are catching fire in apartments and whatnot. A lot of times what they're finding is that the charging infrastructure that was there was not rated or not designed to do what they're asking it to do. So anyone ever charge their iPhone or their phone on a hot day or put it in your pocket, it gets hot relatively quickly, right? Now imagine that on a higher level scale. Now you're talking about something that you can ride on or a vehicle that you can drive. If we take that same approach and look at that from that perspective, we need to ensure that how we're charging our systems actually meets the standards that we need to have to be able to do it. Conversely, the same thing applies to when you own an EV. If you're out driving around and let's say you want to stop at Meijer and do some grocery shopping, and while you're there you're going to plug in and charge it, I would encourage everyone to look at the charger, look at the handle, look at the cords. It's a new technology, and with new technology, everyone is learning along the way how to make it safer for everyone to use. And when you have communal things, people are pretty abusive on those things sometimes, right? So if you're not cognizant when you go up to use their charger, is it functioning correctly? Is the handle damaged? Is the cord damaged? Just to make sure that you're protecting yourself as best as you can and not creating a situation where the fire department needs to get involved.
And that's a good point. I know that at the Bureau of Fire Services, we have the storage tanks division, and you look at the number of gas dispensers that get hit today on islands at gas stations, and there have been groups talking about that as we put more and more charging stations up. You're exactly right. Hey, I thought I was in reverse, I was in drive, and I hit the charger, right? So some different things. So it's going to definitely add some nuances that probably first responders haven't seen. So that's a great point. Lisa, thought, ideas?
Yeah, so I think the biggest piece here is to keep in mind that it's going to be a tiered response. Everything that we're doing in terms of collaboration and training and knowledge sharing has to be what can we do in the immediate short term. We have 5 great panelists here with 5 distinct areas of expertise. How can we share that knowledge and get it out to the millions of, and I'm going to go back to first responders, the traditional firefighters, tow companies and such. How can we get them this information and this knowledge in a consistent way and in a way that's been vetted? So you're not looking at someone who's a for-profit entity trying to sell you a tarp or a solvent or something along those lines. How can we get valuable, useful information that is, for example, coming directly from GM or coming directly from the NFPA, but make it so that these fire departments across the country aren't having to go to every OEM's website to find the shutdown procedures, or to go to every battery manufacturer's website to find the storage procedures, and then go to your site to find the response information. How can we create a tool or an initiative that brings all that information together? And then I think you scaffold it up from there. You go into then virtual training or video conversations, and then eventually up to a more national hands-on training component, very similar to what GM put on so successfully. But I think in order for this to make progress, it has to be multiple streams happening at the same time, because it's changing too fast. If we wait till we find the golden goose that works for everyone, the technology is obsolete.
Right. Yeah, definitely the evolution continues to move on. So how about this? We're kind of we're into the final 15 minutes here. How about I'll ask each of you something that maybe the first question or even the second question didn't, that now that you've heard others talk, that you feel that we need to talk about it. We talk about it in the spirit of collaboration. So, Todd, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I think that any company that is going to produce an EV vehicle should follow GM's lead in this perspective. I think, to everyone here's point, we need to have one repository for every single process in emergency response. How to shut the vehicle down, how to safely extinguish the fire, how to extricate, where the cut points are in a vehicle. It shouldn't be, I have to go here, 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 and here. And it should be interlinked so that the fire departments get that information while it's happening. So 911 is activated. In GM's example, OnStar would alert the 911 operator as to the health of the battery, what's going on, and that would be relayed to the fire department. In that same context, they should also be able to, on their rig, have access to the cut points, the type of vehicle, what type of battery it is, and all the things that they need to know. So when they show up, they can perform their job, safely, but they can also do what they're there to do, which is to stop fire propagation, to save whoever might be in that accident, and to protect the property and the roadways in Michigan and everywhere else in the country. So I think that's the part that needs to start evolving and building up in this area.
Lisa, some thoughts now that you've heard the other speakers? And
I think the biggest piece, to Todd's point, and then I think, Mike, you said it earlier, it's making sure that it's where you need it when you need it, and that it's valuable and that it's useful. And it's the time, having been in several car accidents in my life, none of which were my fault. Promise, none of them were my fault. It's seconds, right? You have to make those decisions in seconds, and having that information in a way that's consistent and useful. And then it's just taking the model that has worked with GM, that you've demonstrated success with, the loan program that we've seen work for 30 years with Ford, and then getting everybody that's in that room and a lot of these suppliers in this room and figuring out, okay, you bring a perspective on this technology, get on this call with us and have this conversation, and let's do something with it. Let's bring these minds together and actually go. Because I think there's been a lot of conversation, and I'm eager to get us, moving.
yeah, and that's a great point. If I could get our folks that are doing the audiovisual to throw up the QR code. If you're in the crowd today, if you're listening to what we're talking about, and this is something that you're interested in, we're just asking you to take a little time, take out your phone, take a picture, and reach out to us, because that's what we're really looking for. It really is kind of the grassroots, get it rolling. The more people we have providing the feedback helps us with getting a better message out across the country. Mike, thoughts?
This is the faster more people can realize EVs are here, and the fire service is 5 years behind. And so when I say there's a sense of urgency, there is, because I see it, I feel it, and I want to do everything we can to prepare our firefighters riding on big red fire trucks. And with that being said, there's a lot of secrets and there's a lot of things in play, but we should never be holding information that we can't be sharing across manufacturers, across industries, and we really need to be diving in and learning. I am truly in awe of the vehicles that are sitting over here. They are gorgeous, they're safe, and I just go back that there are bad things that unfortunately happen at times. Accidents are accidents. And so how can we develop a space where it's okay to have some conversations? And if you start to think about some uniqueness, let's go beyond for a second. I need some friends that are going to help me figure out how to make the next fire SUV. And what I mean by this is you can't interview a fire person who's served for very long, who was in a fire command vehicle or an ambulance that drove that vehicle through floodwaters. Whether it's here in Michigan, whether it's in down south. The question is, when I'm all electric, can my battery withstand saltwater immersion and still respond? And if I'm buying a vehicle that can't, how do I do it, and what do we start to do? And so as we start to get into that large SUV that's going to meet our demographic, how do we start getting those ambulances and fire stuff ready so we are to respond? So I flipped the script a little bit beyond, but there's no doubt that we need to study this. We've got to find the best techniques for extinguishing these fires. Nobody wants the freeway closed for 3 or 4 hours. And trust me, we're trying. But if you read the guides, it says you can't extinguish, you're going to actively cool. That's a change in terminology. And so we want to make sure we're doing the best. We want to provide those. And quite honestly, I want to test them. I want to test some of these techniques, and that takes money and funding and support. And so there's a lot of dialogue that we have to do. We got to keep exploring. When we see an incident, let's explore it. And then let's think beyond this today, and let's start thinking about those battalion chiefs that are working in Denver, Colorado, that need that vehicle to be reliable for 24 hours. Let's think about how every single one of our ambulances right now in the U.S. are on an F-350, 550 chassis, a Chevy 5500. When that's electrified, how do I make an ambulance work? Because we've got to start having those conversations.
Ron, ideas?
Well, since they're talking over us, I'll just be really, really loud. Let me offer, and Chief, you really opened up a pathway to some positivity. I think we have to remain really positive about that tech that's behind us. People ask me all the time, hey, Ron, you fancy yourself as a battery safety guy. Would you put your family in an electric vehicle right now? The answer is absolutely, unequivocally, yes, without question. We have data from some international insurance consortiums that pretty much lead us to this idea that the electric vehicle is probably 100 times less likely to fail than the car most of us drove in here on, internal combustion engine. Now, that doesn't mean they're perfect. That does mean that they offer unique risk issues that we absolutely have to address. A friend of mine who's a fire chief in Connecticut always tells me we have everything we need to deal with that EV fire on that fire rig, and we've been dealing with it for 100 years. We know how to do it. We just have to make some tweaks.
That's a great point. Victoria?
Yes, just closing thought, I'd say be proactive for fire safety. Anytime there's a battery incident, it's plastered all over the news, and all of those take a step back. So, there's several, manufacturers and organizations that are really taking a proactive approach and getting out in front with the information of how to deal with it before it happens. And that is so important, just so that we don't set the industry back. So what we're trying to do is do testing to get that communication out of how to deal with it safely and to show that there is a solution to the problem. And I think that that's just so important because it's clickbait on the news, right? And not coming to the table with solutions is not how it's going to cause a setback. So I think investing in that early, showing, do fire testing and show how to handle it, right? And just get your information out, come to the table, come talk to us. NFPA is known as an organization to where we want to bring people together. We want to have communication and collaboration in those discussions from everyone involved in that ecosystem. So I think definitely get involved and be proactive on that front so that we can get ahead of it. Incidents will happen, but we can deal with them.
And I think, Victoria, you make a really good point. When it comes to consumer adoption of EVs, one of the biggest concerns is the trust in the technology. And to your point, you do get so much additional press around battery fires, whether it's on the road or on a cargo ship. But telling the stories of the successes, telling the stories about how the technology is being tested, how safe it is, how it's being handled, how the first responders are learning about it, that's going to help increase that consumer trust, which is going to make it, more easy for the industry to move forward towards EVs a little bit faster than perhaps we are right now. So I think it benefits everyone from the drivers to the OEMs.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Mike, you bring up the fact of, we need reliable vehicles to transport patients, but, you look at already what's going on in the space. We've got cots now, there's self-loading that are they're gonna save the backs of our firefighters, right? And the injuries, and even devices that do better CPR than we can, right? and the communities that are getting those. And those are all, this is battery technology that is definitely making a difference in the fire service. And that's what we really wanted to do today. We wanted to talk about the positives. The fire service is ready to respond. The first responders are ready to respond. Law enforcement, we're going to continue to do what we do. What we are looking for, though, is how do we collaborate with the folks who are developing this equipment, who are putting the products together so that we have the best information so that we can make the best decisions to make it safer for everyone who lives in our country. And you know, the other part of, you know, you bring up too is a car fire that lasts for a couple of hours. I think pretty much for the folks around this stage who've been in the fire, if you want to say extinguishing side of the fire business, car fires are pretty bread and butter. 500 gallons of water on the truck, we pretty much roll in, put it out, the tow truck comes and it's gone. And that's what we're starting to see where it's going to start to affect some of the transportation. We're definitely here to work through that. It's been a pleasure to be able to moderate this panel today. I know that they have another session coming up, and one of the things that they've shared very clearly with us is they would like us to move on. We're going to move that way, and we know there's some folks out there that may have some questions. If you want to ask us questions individually, or you want to talk more about how you can participate in helping the first responders across our country and really across the world get better at handling these type of technologies and putting out fires and dealing with them at extrications, we're going to be right over there, and we definitely would like to spend some time with you. So thank you for the opportunity to be here today, and thank you everyone for traveling to be here. And I look forward to what we're going to get to do next, because today is the start. We're going to do something next, and it's going to involve every one of us that are on this stage. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you all.